So the topics of today will be to introduce the Ajax framework, which is part of web prototyping. And then, since it's your last lecture on web prototyping, I will go back to your web prototyping coursework because you will have all the elements to complete it. And also, I would like to wish you a happy Pancakes Day. I don't know if you will eat many pancakes today, but you should. So, as I said, this is the last lecture on web prototyping. So you will have all the material necessary to complete the larger piece of coursework, which is worth 30% of the final mark. And we will go into the details, and you will have the opportunity to ask any questions at the end of the lecture. The next lectures will be delivered by Pushpa, and it will be about opportunities and trends. And I will come back at the end for network technologies. Okay, a bit of feedback about activity 16, which was about file formats and image and video compressions. So a very small number of submissions, only 25. However, most of them were excellent. I mean, I think once you have understood what to do, it's quite mechanical. And once we have done it once, one compression, you know how to do the others. Someone mentioned they were not quite sure about questions 3 and 5. So in questions 3 and 5, you have to take the original image I am providing to you. So there are 2 images. So each time you start from the original image, and you use a piece of software such as iPhone View, and you compress it using different types of formats and parameters. One question was about digital photography. So usually when you have DSLR, so the high quality cameras, you have the opportunity to store the data as raw format. So that's the original data. There is no lossy compression. There is some compression, obviously, but you haven't lost a single bit of information. But those images can get very, very big. Okay. So usually those cameras, they always offer you the opportunity to store in JPEG, and they offer you generally to store in JPEG very high resolution, and so on. But yeah, if you are more on the artist type of photograph, raw format may be the best option. And I guess if you are an artist, you take some time to take photographs, so you are not taking hundreds in a few minutes, so you can take your photographs, download them, and then do your work with them. The main issue in that activity was about calculating the compression ratio. So some people expected that some software would do it for them. Actually, you have to do the calculation yourself. So, to clarify the process for people who had troubles, I'm going to give an example. So basically, the compression ratio is you divide the size of the image before compression by the size of the image after compression. So you can use any formats you want. If you are using both in bits, it's fine, or both in bytes, it's fine as well. What is important is to divide like with like. So here is, for example, an image which has been heavily compressed. And you can see that quite a lot of information has been lost in the process. And here are the size of the images are seen in your folder. So that those values are rounded, so that's not really the values we are interested in. So to get the proper size, you right-click on your file, and you get all the information, and you can get the size, the actual size of the image in bytes. As I said last week, there are two sizes. There is the actual size of the image, and then there is the size of the image, how it has been stored on the disk. Okay, so Windows and other have a certain minimum size for, and have use blocks, so you need to use full blocks. So when you store, it's always a bit larger than the actual size of the image. Obviously, for the compression ratio, we would like to use the first number, because that's the actual size of the information. So that was the original size of the image, so around a megabyte, and that's the JPEG, the size of the image after a very strong JPEG compression, as you can see. So in this case, the size of the image is just over 2 kilobytes. Okay, so we went from around 1,000 to 2. If we use the TIFF compression, you can see that where it's not as strong, you still have 220 kilobytes. So the original size of the image, which is B0 in my formula, is 977,085. Then I have the two sizes of my compressed images. And then in order to get the compression ratio, I divide the first number by the new size of your image. So in the first case, which I used strong compression with JPEG, keeping 1%, I get a compression ratio of 444. In the second case, it's a 50% compression using a TIFF compression. I get a compression ratio of 4.3. Okay. So for people who have problem calculating compression ratios or who are not clear, that's the way to do it. Okay, so I don't see, is there any question? I think it's quite straightforward, and once you have done it once, you know how to do it. Okay, so let's start with this first part of the lecture, which is about AJAX. So AJAX stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And so we are going to explain every single word so that you have an understanding of what AJAX is about. Okay. So the first word is asynchronous. Okay. Which means that if we go back, because AJAX is a framework which allows you to have dynamic web pages, and we have already seen one way of doing dynamic web pages was to use PHP. Okay. So you remember, you click on a link which is a PHP page, it sends a request to a server. The server is going to process the information on the PHP file, maybe retrieve data from the database, and all that information is going to be put into a HTML page, because your browser cannot read, cannot understand PHP. So you do the request, some processing is going on, and what is returned, it's a new HTML page, which is uploaded in your browser. Okay? So it means you click, you wait for the processing, and a new page appears. So that's typically what a synchronous process is. You do a request, and you are waiting for the answer. Okay? Which means that sometimes when the calculations is a bit long, you are just hanging, waiting for the new page to be uploaded. Which means that as a user experience, it's not always great. So when you are using a asynchronous scheme, it's different. It means that you are not waiting for the answer. You are making a request, processing is going on, but your web page is still active. Okay, so there is maybe a square where the new information is coming. It's not there yet, it doesn't matter, you still have access to your whole page, your browser, and you can look at other aspects of the page. Okay? Which means that as a user experience, it's much better. And that the A in Ajax offers. So Ajax is not a technology, it's not like PHP, for example, but it's a framework where different web development methods are brought together and work together. Okay? So as I said, the aim is to have an interactive website and an enjoyable user experience, which will not be interrupted. You are not waiting for the information, the page is still active. So a very good example is Google Maps. Okay, so now many websites offers you how to get there, okay, or how to contact. And you have a page with information how to get there, and they get a Google Map. Okay, so in the background, that web page makes a request and say, could you load the Google Map in that square, and sometimes it takes a bit of time, and you don't want the user to be waiting for the information while the Google Map is loading. The user can still read the address and some other information. It's not just a synchronous process. So here is an example at the British Museum. That's the Google Map. And because the connection, you can see that the image takes a little bit of time to reload. Okay, it's not completely continuous. You can see a slight delay. But since we are using an asynchronous one, we are not reloading a whole page each time. It's just that bit of the image of the page which is updated regularly. Okay, so while it's being loaded, I'm still on the same page. It's not reloaded. The whole page is not reloaded. Okay, and that's done using the Ajax framework. So by the way, the British Museum page has a suffix that we haven't seen yet. So far we have seen the HTML pages and the PHP pages. Yeah. This one is a ASP page. So as you know, Microsoft really enjoy to offer their own technology, which is usually not compatible with the others. So they have their own framework for web application, which is called ASP.NET. Okay, and those pages have a suffix which was ASP, and since Office has moved to the XML format, like you had the
Can you only use that on Windows servers, or can you use it on Linux servers?
ESP, you will be having them on both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you can use it on any system. But eventually, when you know one system, switching to the other one is not a big deal. Okay. And obviously, they are going to use in the background the same technology, and in this case, Ajax. Okay, another example. Nowadays, when you are doing a research, you have a box, you start typing. So where do we want to go on holiday?
Barcelona.
Barcelona, okay. So you start typing, just B, and you have a list of possible destinations. We could go to Britain, but Barcelona seems to be a much better choice. And automatically the list is updated and reduced to the important information. So again, that's Ajax in action. Okay. Information is retrieved from the background, but the page is not uploaded, and the information appears when it's available. Okay, we are not waiting, and there's no reloading of the page. It's an asynchronous process. When the information is available, we get it. Okay, so we hopefully have understood the concept of asynchronicity. Okay, so Ajax, as I said, is not a new technology. It's bringing together mainly two existing technologies. So one of them is called JavaScript, and the other one is XML. Okay, so JavaScript gives you the jar of Ajax, and XML gives you the X of Ajax. And obviously in the background you will have some HTML and CSS. Okay. So what JavaScript does, JavaScript runs in your browser. So you are the client, and JavaScript is handling what is happening on the client side. Okay. You are making requests, you are clicking things, and JavaScript is handling that. So that's the client side. Then, when you are using JavaScript, you are doing something which is called an XML HTTP request, and that allows you to communicate with the server side. Okay, so JavaScript is allowing communication to the server in order to exchange data, and that data is usually exchanged using what is called the XML format. Okay, and we will have a look at that. That type of request was developed initially by Internet Explorer, and eventually it became a standard. And as I said, communication is done using usually XML, but this communication is asynchronous. So you don't reload the page, you don't have a form with a submit button. You know, it's all done in a very smooth manner. Okay, so if we compare again with PHP, JavaScript runs in your browser. Okay, so your browser understands JavaScript. You don't need the server to translate and interpret what is going on. However, JavaScript is going to contact possibly the server if exchange of information is required. Okay, so some JavaScript code can be processed locally if you don't need some extra information. But very often you do this request, get some data from a web server, and complete your processing. So as you see, it's completely different from the PHP scheme, where you do a PHP request, the web server is going to do all the processing, and eventually return HTML page, which is going to be a reload of the page where you are at the moment of the request. So typically, what's happening in Ajax, so you are going to write some JavaScript, and you are going to do that XML HTTP request. Obviously, you are going to add some parameters, such as the URL of the server and what kind of data you are interested in. And that information is going to be sent to the server. During that time, since it's an asynchronous mode, the script or your web page carry on being processed. Okay, so maybe the script will be doing two things. One is asking for a request, and then do some calculation. So the two things will happen at the same time, and hopefully the request will be returned quickly enough so that the user experience is ideal. So the server has received that request, and maybe the server will be doing some calculation on its side. Okay? Maybe the request will require some PHP to do some work. Maybe on the server you will have some PHP code which will be returning the data you have asked for. And eventually the server, when it has finished its calculation, is going to send back the information. And JavaScript will detect the moment that information arrives and update the web page. Not reload the web page, but just the area where that information should go will be updated. Okay? So somehow JavaScript is listening from any data coming from the server, listening in the background, listening while being active. Okay, it's not just I listen and I don't do anything else. And as I say, you have a refresh of the display, but not of the entire page. So very often when you have an application, the front end, so the bits that the user is having, what is happening in the browser is in JavaScript. JavaScript is doing those requests. The back end, so that's the part which is hidden from the user. So that's the clever stuff which is happening on the server. So the back end is going to process a request sent by JavaScript and send the response back. And typically on the back end, you will have some kind of program running and doing the tasks which were requested. So we already mentioned PHP, but there are other languages which are quite popular on the server side, like Ruby or Perl. And JavaScript, obviously, as I said, listen to responses, process those responses, because maybe there are still some calculation needed on the front end, and then it's going to display the results by refreshing the part of the web page. So the communication between the front end and the back end can be done using XML, but it doesn't need to. Okay? XML is a very good standard, so that's what is recommended. But for some applications, maybe just a simple text file is an easier way of communicating. So I think now it would be quite interesting to understand what the difference between a compile and interpreted execution is. Does anybody have an idea about the difference between compile and interpreted execution? No? Okay, so you write your code, which is text, some kind of English flavor programming language. And if you are using a compiler, So the compiler is going to use the information you have typed and convert it into binary code into a format that your machine can directly use. Okay? So we just forget about English and nice structure. Now it's a set of instructions that the machine can understand directly. Okay? If we are using an interpreter, the process is very different, because in the compiler case, you write your code, you compile, you get an executable, and now each time you want to use the executable, you want to use that program, you just double-click on your executable. Okay? All the work of translation from an English-inspired language to a language that the computer understands has been done once and for once. Okay? In the interpreter case, each time you are running a program, each line is converted one after the other. Okay? So it's executed step by step. Okay? So there hasn't been any pre-conversion to a machine code. Okay? So you can see that already there are going to be advantages and disadvantages for both. For example, if you write a piece of code and there's an error of syntax in the middle, your compiler will say, I don't understand. I cannot produce a binary code that the machine will be able to execute. If you do the same code and you use an interpreter, the interpreter is going to read the first line, convert it and execute it, second line, third line, and at some point you will have that line that doesn't make any sense, and the interpreter will stop. Okay? So you can imagine that when you are debugging a piece of code, an interpreter language is pretty good. Okay? You can change the line and, yeah, try that line now, and it carry on. Okay? Obviously, since you are doing the conversion from your initial language to binary code at runtime, it's going to be much slower. Yeah. Because with a compiler, you do all the hard work once, and now it's ready to use, just double click and you execute it. While the interpreter does the work each time, line by line. There's a way to try to get the best of both worlds, is to create something which is called bytecode or portable codes. Okay? So in that case, you have your program, which has been written in a given language, and what you are going to create is some kind of intermediate program. It's not a program which is going to be read, that can be read by the machine directly, but already a lot of the conversion has been done. Okay? So basically it's a code which is portable, so it is not specific to the machine yet, but it has already analyzed your code and started the conversion for being executed by a machine. Okay? But the process hasn't been to the full extent, which means that at that stage, the code can be understood by any machine. Okay? It's not specific to your specific PC, your Linux machine. It's already something which is close to the machine code, but it's kind of a general machine code. So you do half of the work, and you store the code, your program in this bytecode format, and then when you run the code, then you have an interpreter. When the interpreter, instead of converting from English sentences into machine code, is using that portable format where most of the conversion has already been done. Okay? Which means that it's going to be much quicker to execute your code. So very often people say, yeah, this language is a compiled language, and this language is an interpreted language. And actually, saying that doesn't make any sense. Okay? A language, it's a way of providing instruction, and to compile or interpret is one implementation of how you are going to convert those instructions into a way of executing it. Okay? Which means that, in theory, any language can be compiled or interpreted. Okay? In practice, some languages are always compiled, and some languages are always interpreted. Okay? And there are a few languages where you can choose one option or another. So very often you do your development, prototyping in the interpreting mode, and then you want performance, you switch to compile mode. Okay? But conceptually, there are two very different things. You have a language, which is how to write a set of instructions, and then the execution, and that's how you are going to interpret those instructions. Are you going to compile first, or are you going to read them one by one? So usually, C and C++ are compiled, okay? And it's seen as they are seen as very performant languages because the processing is very fast. Okay? Other languages like Perl, PHP, and MATLAB are usually interpreted. Again, I say usually because, for example, you can get compiled version of MATLAB, compiled version of PHP, but it's not the traditional way of using it. And then you have languages like Python and Java, which are usually interpreted, but through using the bytecode intermediate thing. So that those, once you have converted into a bytecode, those programs written with those languages can be executed on any machine. Yeah? Which is obviously very good for portability. So let's see if you have followed this brief description on compiled and interpreted codes. Only 4 responses. All right. Can do better than that. And this one is not a tricky question. In principle, I gave you the answer 5 or 10 minutes ago. Anybody else? Only 10, 12 votes. Okay, 15, that's better. 16. Okay, so obviously I'm not a very good lecturer. Yeah, not good at all. So let's start from the end. Can a compiled code be run on any machine? No, because when you are compiling, you are converting your program into instructions that the very machines where you are compiling your program can understand. Okay, so as soon as you compile, your code is dedicated to your machine. Okay, So you can see that, for example, when you are uploading a piece of software and you are uploading an executable, they ask you, which machines do you want? Is it a Linux? Is it a Windows? Is it Windows 64 bits or is it 32 bits? Okay. So each executable is very specific to the machine you are going to use. Okay. And that's when you are not taking advantage of this very specific feature of your machine. Okay? If you have a very specific machines with special graphic cards and all those things, you can compile it so that it's going to use all those features, but your program is not going to run in any other machine. Okay? So usually, when programs are compiled, they can be run on, let's say, family of machines. Some executables which are machines which are quite similar, same operating system, same type of microprocessors, but still you can share between machines which are similar configurations. However, you cannot use your executable from Linux to Windows. Okay? So when you are compiling, you are choosing the type of machine your code is going to run on. Okay? And as I say, if you do some aggressive compiling, taking all the feature of your specific machines, then it's not going to run on any other. Okay. So interpreted programs, as I said, they have your code, they take each line, convert it to the machine code, execute it, and go to the next line. While a compiled program, you do all the works of conversions once, and then you execute it. Okay, so obviously, the compiled program is going to be much faster than the interpreted one. Okay. So the right answer is the first one, because when you are using a compiler, you have initially your source code, and you are converting those instructions which are in a programming language into instructions which are in the machine language. Okay? So it means that when you are running your program, you just need that one. The original instructions are not necessary. Okay? And also, those instructions, the code of a program is very often something which is secret. Okay? When you are using Office, you just get the executables. They don't tell you how they wrote the program, otherwise anybody could take it and change it and create maybe a better version of Office. Okay? So it's also good for, in terms of copyright, you just get the executable, something that a human cannot read. It's only for a machine. Okay? But it means that the source code is not necessary. Obviously, if you are going to use an interpreted language, the source code is the input, because the interpreter is going to read each line independently. Okay. So the correct answer was A, and only 31% of you have it correct. So that's not very good. Okay. So let's look at another way of looking at languages. We have what we call the scripting languages. Okay. So a scripting language first is a programming language. It's a programming language which is usually simple. Okay, so it has limitation on what it can do. Okay, so it's not a complete language such as Java, where you can use Java for doing anything you want. Okay, you can do e-commerce, you can do physics, mathematics, whatever you want to do, you can do it in Java. And scripting language, since they are very simple, they don't have a large set of instructions, they are usually interpreted. Okay? So, scripting languages, the code is in plain text, okay? And obviously will be interpreted by the application. You don't need a compiler and a special environment. So typically your browser will be able to to understand your scripting language. And since it's interpreted, it's going to be platform independent. Okay. If your browser understands it, the browser is going to do the translation of, or the interpretation of your code to instructions that your machine is going to understand. And as I said previously, it's going to be slower because you have this interpretation line by line, and it's not going to be as powerful as a standard programming language because it doesn't have all the required functions, and it's not designed for efficiency. Okay? There are small pieces of code which are very useful that you are going to run, but that's not the type of languages you are going to use for heavy computations and stuff like that. So, for example, PHP is a scripting language. Okay. If you have already done a bit of Java, you have done a bit of PHP, you can see that Java is much more powerful than PHP. PHP is very set on web applications, and it does that job very well, but there are many things where many applications where PHP couldn't be used. Okay. So PHP is seen as a scripting language. So what about JavaScript? Okay, because that's an important component of Ajax. What do you know about JavaScript? So it looks that JavaScript has a bit Java in its name. So does it mean it's somehow related? And if it's related, how is it related? But this, as the name suggests, is a scripting language. Yeah, JavaScript, scripting language. So it's scripting, but is it Java? That's the question. Wow, I'm really impressed this time. Done very well, very, very well. So indeed, JavaScript has nothing to do with Java. Okay. So it's a first web scripting language. It was developed in '95. As a parent, you have Java and C++. So a lot of the concepts that were around in those languages are used as well in JavaScript. But since it's a script, it's a bit simpler, and it's also more flexible. So for example, there is loose typing, okay, which means that typically in Java, you can only do operations between variables of the same type. Okay. In Java, you cannot add a number with a character. Okay. Doesn't make any sense. In JavaScript, it's flexible. It will try to find a way to combine the two. Okay. Which means that it's not as rigorous, but since you are not writing huge pieces of code, if you know what it's doing, it's okay, you know, because if you wanted to convert a character into an integer in Java, you can do it. You know, you write a couple of lines, and here it does it automatically, you know, which is nice because it's a small piece of code. The fact that it's doing a bit of hacking, if you are aware of it, it's okay. But if you have a huge piece of code with millions of lines, you cannot afford to do things like that. Okay. So for example, if you have a variable with a number and a variable which is a Boolean, JavaScript would be very happy to add the two. Okay? It will say, yeah, true, it's 1, false is 0. So if I want to add a Boolean to a number, yeah, I know how to do it. Okay. But JavaScript is not Java. There are similarities. They have similar ancestors, but they are very different. So someone said that JavaScript versus Java was like carpet versus car and hamster versus ham. Okay, just happened that the first letters are similar. So JavaScript was named JavaScript for marketing reasons. Okay. At the time, Java was a new language. Everybody was thinking, yeah, Java is the future. That's the language we want to know. It's compared to C++, which is a bit complex and not very well structured. Java is a new Chinese language. It's a language which can be used on any machine because of portable format. So Java was really the big thing in the world of computing. So people who created that new script say, okay, they love Java, let's call that script JavaScript. Okay? That's the only reason it's called JavaScript. Not because it has to do with Java, just for marketing reasons. So if we compare the two, so both of them have C and C++ as ancestors. Both of them are object-oriented. But as I said, Java is a complete programming language. You can do anything with it. While JavaScript is very limited to a small set of commands. Java can run on its own. Okay, I mean, you can embed it into a web page using an applet, for example, but conceptually, it's a programming language. You create your portable format and then you can execute it. Just double click on it. While JavaScript must be placed inside an HTML document. Okay, so it's really restricted. If you don't have a web browser, you don't have JavaScript. Yeah. And Java is converted into a bytecode. Okay, so performance is in the background. Okay, we want to be able to execute it quickly, but still to be portable and being able to use it on any machine, Linux, Windows, or other. While JavaScript is a script, so it's interpreted line by line, it's going to be slow. Okay. But since it's not made for doing big calculations, it's okay. So the limitation of JavaScript is it's inside a web page, an HTML web page, which means that anybody can read the code. You just click your right button, view source code, and you can see your whole JavaScript. Okay? So you share your code with the world, which has positive aspects and negative aspects. Okay. There is also, for security reasons, you don't want to upload a page which has JavaScript, and you don't want that JavaScript to start messing around with what you have on your machine. Okay? Otherwise, it would be too easy to create viruses and stuff. You just put it in JavaScript, you run it on your browser, and it starts deleting everything. Okay? So because of that, JavaScript cannot access your hard disk. Okay? If you want data, go to the server. Okay? You have to ask data from a server. So you cannot write on your hard disk, which allow to make sure that nobody is going to take advantage of your machine. Since it's designed to run on any platform, obviously it's not going to take advantage of your specific platform. Okay, you may have a graphic card for accelerating everything. Yeah, but JavaScript cannot say, oh, because you have that machine, we are going to do it that way. No. It must work on any platform, so just assuming that you have the basic graphic card. And as I said, it's not full featured, so many commands that you would expect on in a programming language, you will not find them in JavaScript. It's not made for writing huge pieces of code. Okay, so I think here when you are writing in JavaScript, you are speaking about tens of lines, hundreds of lines at most. Okay, you are not writing much bigger than that. So here is the simplest way of using JavaScript in your web page. So basically, here you have your code in HTML, and you have a tag, script, and you are going to use JavaScript. And inside, you can have your JavaScript commands. So here, very simple commands you are just writing inside your web page using the function document.write. Okay. Note that since it's inheriting from C++ or Java, each line have a semicolon to say that it's the end of the instruction. And it's very important to know what the end of the instruction is because it's an interpreted language. So it's going to read line by line. So it's interesting to know where the line starts. Yeah. And another aspect which reminds us of C++ and Java is how comments are used. So you can have the double slash if you have one line of comment, or slash star if you want to have a paragraph of comments. Okay, so in terms of data types, you only have three basic ones: strings, number, and booleans. So you can see that compared to a language like Java, it's very limited. You don't have the difference between integers and floats, for example. You have all the standard operators, control statements. You have all the basic math routines. You have a means to ask the user to enter some values. Okay. And then you have functions that you can call. You know what a palindrome is?
Is it a word that you can read backwards the same as you do forwards?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's a word or a sentence that can be read left to right or right to left. So that's a palindrome. Spaces don't count. Okay, so now let's look at XML. So XML is the standard format for exchanging data on the web, but now it's used everywhere. So XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. So it's a markup language. It's not a programming language. It looks like HTML. So it's a language which is based on tags. And it happens that the latest version of HTML are written in XML. Okay, so HTML started. People thought, oh, that looks like a good idea, but let's do it properly. And we get XML. But XML is an extensible markup language, which means that the user decides what are the tags they are going to use. Okay? It's not like HTML, you have a set of tags. In XML, you can create your own tags. Okay? So for example, here it's a XML file, okay? So first you're saying that it's an XML file, and then I'm creating 4 types of tags which are specific to my application. My application is about sending messages. I have the sender, the recipient, and the body of the message. So I'm created the 4 tags I need, okay? And all my application will use that format. So when I'm reading those messages, if I want to know who is the sender, I say, okay, what is between the 2 TO tags? And that's where the sender is, okay? So obviously it can be, you can have a hierarchy, okay? Already those tags belong to the node tags, okay? So you can get something quite complicated, but it's a set structure, and you have a lot of parsers which can be used. You just tell them, you take the parser and you say, yeah, what I want to parse is a text file with that XML tags, and the parser will be able to retrieve that very easily. So that's why XML has become very popular. And obviously, HTML is just one type of XML document where there is a specific set of tags. Okay, so let's look at how XML, JavaScript are working together. So first of all, in the JavaScript section, okay, so the script tag is there. What I'm going to do is I'm basically going to open that XML file, okay? And as we have seen in PHP, you have 2 modes for sending information, the get or the post modes. So you open that file, you send it, and then you are going to do some, and when you receive the file, it's going to go in that variable, XML doc. Okay, so XML doc is the file which has been retrieved. And then my JavaScript code is going to take my XML doc and is going to extract the information according to the different tag names. Okay? What is inside the 2 tag name, from tag name, body tag names. Okay? And what is retrieved is going to be put into those variables. Yeah? And then at the start of my HTML file, I am just displaying the content of those variables. So, so here, to, from, and message are just the text. And here I'm writing what is written in the message that I received from the server. Yeah, is that clear? So you have a text in XML format. You are going on your HTML page where some JavaScript is running. JavaScript is going to retrieve that file. That file is in XML, so it's going to use the XML functions to retrieve what is between the tags, and what has been retrieved is put into variables. And those variables are used in order to display the content of your message in the right format, or the format you want for your web page. Okay? So it means that if you want to upload to dynamically change your web page, the only thing you need to change is your XML file. Each time you load your web page, you will get a different message on the display. And you will get something like that. So there is only one thing that we didn't mention in that code is this XML HTTP request is to initiate the communication between your JavaScript and the client. Okay? And there are different types of requests depending on basically the browser you are using. If you are using now a modern browser, they're all happy with the XML HTTP request without parameters. If you are using one of the older browsers, you are going to use these ActiveX objects for the request. So in practice, you are going to use a piece of code like this one. So once you are running your JavaScript, your JavaScript is asking on which browser am I? Oh, I'm on this browser, so I'm going to do that request, or I'm on that browser, and do that request. That way, the right request is done whatever the browser you are using, and you can just forget about it. Okay, so after that request, so the connection has been established, you can open a file. So first you have to choose if you are going to use the get or the post modes. We have already discussed that before. Then you have to pass the URL of the file. Where is it on the server? And then you are going to say if it's a asynchronous request or a synchronous request. Usually you want it asynchronous, better user experience, and the data will be processed when they arrive. But maybe there are applications where you want to wait. Okay, so you are still. Then you need the send command. Okay, to tell you that now the time to. I open the communication. Now send me the data. And then the data are returned using the response XML, where the object means your data are going to be stored. Okay. So here we are going to look at maybe a more interesting application. It's basically a small quiz. Okay. So which planet has a ring? And if I click on the button, I get the answer, which is Saturn. Okay. So there's a small piece of JavaScript. We can do that job. So here is the body of your code. Okay, so it's an HTML code. So I have the header, which planet has got a ring. And I have a button. And when I click the button, it calls the go function. Okay. The go function is a JavaScript function that I've created myself. Okay. So the go function is going to do, it will check if the XML HTTP request has been done or not. Okay. And you should write it here. As I said, you write it the way I showed you before, where you test the different browsers. So if it has been done, I am going to look for that document. And when that document arrives, I want to call that function. Okay? So it's asynchronous. Only when the document arrives, that function is called. And so when that document has arrived, it's to check if it has arrived, I have a value of 4. So you know that it has arrived and everything has arrived properly. Then you can start reading the content of the document. In this case is Saturn. and I can display the results on my web page. Okay. So it's a very simple application of JavaScript. So I don't want to tell you much more about JavaScript and XML. You have the basics, and you have done maybe some JavaScript somewhere else. But you have the basics in order how to integrate it inside your web page. And that's what I will need for your assignment at the end of the year, which is approaching fast. So in activity 17, obviously you will have a quiz with some technical questions about Ajax in general. And I'm going to provide you a couple of JavaScripts, okay? And I want you to study them. And I'm going to ask you, how do they work, okay? Again, you don't need to understand every single line in the single parameter. It's more what is generally doing, okay? So I have two JavaScripts, one that I've shown you already, that's the quiz one. And what I'm going to ask you is to create a quiz with many questions, because at the moment I have only one, okay? So you can reuse my code and change it in order to make it yours and have a whole quiz instead of just a single question. And another one, which is the facility to complete a request. Okay, I'm just typing the first letters, and the system is trying to recognize which word is going to be I want to use. So again, that's a facility that is now all around the web each time that you're doing a search. So now I want you to have some understanding of how it's done. Okay, so that's a simplified version. I give you the code and have a look at it to see how it works, and I will ask you questions in order to see if you have understood it. Okay? So I give you the code, you can download it, you can play with it, and you can change it in order to fulfill the requirements of the activity. Okay, any question on that? No?
When are you going to post the link for the submission activity 17? Because it's
So
not,
I cannot hear you.
because it's not on the status page, the link for the submission. The submission link for activity 17.
Yes, it is. It is not?
No.
Okay, so it will be at 11 it will be. And if at 11:30 it's not, send me an email to remind me that it will be. Sorry about that. It's ready, I just need to upload it. Okay, so if you don't have any question about this specific lecture, I would like to go back to the web prototyping coursework, because it's an important piece of coursework. It's 30% of the mark, but it's also a coursework which are the basis on which you are going to build for the second and the third year. Okay. I supervise some students in their final year, doing their final year project, and they have the creation, for example, of e-commerce websites. So a lot of the techniques that they are using is that what we are seeing now. Okay? Obviously, they use them in a more advanced manner, but all the basics are there. Okay? So if you can complete successfully that piece of coursework, you are on very good basis for your second and final year. Okay, so what I want you to do is to create, so feel free to interrupt and ask questions, because that's the opportunity to ask for any doubts about that piece of coursework. So I want you to create a website based on dynamic web pages. Okay, so the important word is dynamic. So it's not just CSS and HTML. I would expect some PHP and some JavaScript. Okay. Obviously, I want you to write that from scratch. I know that WordPress and others systems can create some fantastic web pages, but you are just doing click, 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 and you get that web page. Okay? You are on your way to become IT professionals. You need to understand what is inside. Okay? So you are going to create a web page which will not be maybe as beautiful as what those systems allow you to create, but at least you have an understanding of line by line of what's happening. It's going to be your web page. It doesn't need to be a big website. Okay, this piece of coursework is about showing off your technical skills. Okay, so if you have one page where you show off your JavaScript and one page where you show off your PHP, I'm happy. Okay, so 2 to 5 pages usually it's fine to create that. I mean, some people create some fantastic websites and they will have 10 to 20 pages, and that's fine, and they are going to get good marks. But you can get a good mark with just a few pages as well. Okay. So it's about really showing your technical skills. Okay. Don't spend maybe too much time on using CSS with some fancy designs. Okay, I mean, you can do it, and that's going to be great. When I will be marking, I will enjoying it, and maybe I will be in a better mood, and maybe you get an extra point. But that's not where most of the points are going to come from. It's about technical skills. And as I said, looking professional or providing a useful service is not essential. Okay, it's better, but you can still get a very good mark if it doesn't look professional and it doesn't do anything very useful. Yeah. And the topic is your choice. Okay, anything legal and of good taste is welcome. Okay, so your passions or your business ideas, whatever you want. So if it's only HTML and CSS, you are not going to pass that piece of coursework. Okay? It's not going to be sufficient to get 15% out of 30. So that I said, I'm expecting some dynamic web page. So PHP, MySQL, JavaScript are the kind of things I will be looking for. Obviously, it's also using advanced stuff. Okay, you can use PHP and just ask what is the date to the server. So you can say, I've used PHP, and that's dynamic. And it's true. So you will get some points for that. But obviously, it's not the same to use PHP that way than using PHP where you're going to retrieve data in a database and then do some processing on those data and display something with maybe something graphical. Yeah. It's not going to be the same complexity, and it's not going to be the same mark. Yeah. Obviously, I want functionalities and code to be fully commented. Okay. You have to explain to me how it works. Okay, because I mean the internet is full of millions of lines of PHP, MySQL, and JavaScript, so it's too easy just to copy it. Okay. So you need to demonstrate that you understand what's happening. Okay. So it's about convincing me. That's your job. And maybe some of you will use code which is not yours. Okay. And that's okay. Okay, because in several activities I ask you, just get something from the web and integrate it in your web page. And being able to do that is already showing some skills. Okay? It's not as good as writing it yourself, but having the abilities to get some code from somewhere, maybe changing it a little bit so that it's integrated in your system, it's still demonstrating something positive. Okay? So I don't want to reject that, but if you do it, make it clear. You know, say, yeah, this part I've integrated in my code. I changed the first and the last line. The stuff in the middle, I have no idea what it's about. Just I know that the outcome is really cool, and I've integrated it doing that and that. Okay? You will get points for that, and there's no problem, and I'm very happy with that. And maybe everybody should do a bit of that as well. Okay? Because that demonstrates some technical skills. Okay? Just the thing is just being honest. Okay? So when I'm speaking about fully commented, as I said, it's really about convincing me that you understand it and you have done it yourself. Okay? So it means that if you are doing some highly complicated PHP, maybe it doesn't need to explain to me how you do your HTML. Okay? If you explain to me some very advanced stuff, I know that you can do the basic stuff. Okay, so if you only do basic stuff, explain the basic stuff in details. But if you do some very advanced one, I'm happy to trust you on the simple one. Okay? I don't want you to do too much work on that. You know, it's about convincing me that you can do the most complicated part of the website, so that I will trust you that you can do the easy bits. Okay, so in your submission, obviously I will need the URL of your live website. I mean, too many times this year, people have provided me with a URL which is on their hard disk, and they provide me C drive. Where is your C drive? Okay. How can I test it? Okay. And so first of all, I cannot test it, so you get 0. That's bad. And secondly, having your web page or website hosted again shows some technical skills. Okay. You manage to get a host, you manage to transfer the files and organize. All those things are important as well. Okay. So if your website is not live, if you are not providing your URL, an actual URL, or just click on it and I get it, you will fail. Okay? Don't put your code on Dropbox. I'm not interested. Okay? What I want to do is to click on it and be on our website. I'm not interested in downloading your file, installing it on my machine. I will not do that. Okay? We are almost 200 students. I cannot afford to do that. Okay? If I want to evaluate your website, I just want to click on the link. And I will play with the menu, the buttons, and everything you have. Okay? With the website, there will be a short report. Okay? First, tell me what is your website for, okay, and for whom. Okay? Is it for a younger audience who are very savvy and know how to use a system, or is it for elderly people where you need to explain a bit better how to use the menus and stuff? Okay, so it can be a very different website depending on the public, and that may explain some choices. And then what I want to know is what are the functionalities? Okay, what are the added stuff that your website offers? You know, yeah, you can upload data in a database, retrieve the data, do some calculations, see a Google map, and give me the list. That's your strong points. Give me the list and I say, oh, if everything is done properly, these students will get an A. Okay? Because if you don't tell me that it can do all that stuff, when I go on your website, I may not find it. Okay? I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to click on every single menu options. Yeah, I'm going to look as exhaustively as possible, but I'm not going to spend an hour on each website. Okay? But if you say, okay, JC, it's very, on my website you will get that, I will make sure that I will check every single point. And yeah, so and for each functionality, try to give me a couple of lines telling me what it's about and maybe what technology is behind. Okay. Yeah, I did that stuff using JavaScript. And then a technical description. Okay. So maybe you are going to copy the piece of code, refer to that function, and for each line, important line, you are going to tell me exactly what it's doing. Okay. And as I said, just provide me explanation for the most advanced ones. Okay. If you can do some very complex PHP, the fact that you are able to retrieve the date, there is no need to put too much explanation on that. Okay. But if retrieving the date is the only thing you can do in PHP, please give me some information about it. And then in the appendix of the short report, provide me all your codes. Okay. And if there are pieces of code which are not yours or where you have just changed a couple of lines, just tell me. Okay. And that way there is no problem. Otherwise, you are at risk of doing plagiarism. And plagiarism, as you know, is a serious offense. You get 0 for the piece of coursework. You may be chucked out of the university or getting some warnings, or your life can be hell if you are using plagiarism. So I'm okay for you to reuse code. Just tell me where it's coming from. Okay, give me the URL. Okay, so the submission deadline is the 18th of April, which is in almost a bit less than 2 months now. Midnight. So on study space, you have in coursework, you have a Turnitin submission. So use that for submitting your report with your appendix, with your code, and it's using Turnitin, so obviously it's checking for plagiarism as well. Okay, so it's not a good idea to plagiarize because we will detect it. So the marking scheme, as I said, I'm really interested in the technical complexity. That's going to be 40% for the mark. Another 40% about how the code works. So basically that's part of the technical complexity somehow, is the other aspect. So 80% is about your technical skills. And then we have 20% about more your design skills, okay, if it looks nice, okay, so it's much less important, but still, if some people want to take advantage and express their creativity, go for it. You will be rewarded for it. So, for each of those 3 categories, I give you some descriptions about what is expected to get what mark. Okay. So, for example, if your page is static, or if you created it using WordPress, every year there are some people creating using WordPress, so obviously you will fail. Okay, there's no. If you have a code which is live, where you did a very good job in HTML, very good job in CSS, and you use a bit of basic PHP functions like the dates and stuff like that, so it's the start of being dynamic, but not very advanced. So you start in being in the 40% plus, and the more you have, the plus plus it goes. If, for example, you are using HTML forms, so you allow the user to enter some data, PHP is going to retrieve those data, save them typically in the database, and you are doing some MySQL. So now we are entering in the 60% plus range. Okay. Obviously, if you use a bit of JavaScript at the same time, you are going higher up. And then if you are using some advanced programming skills, okay, so for this category, you are still doing things which are kind of textbooks. You know how to, in principle, you should know how to contact a server, retrieve data, write, edit. All those things are standard stuff. Okay. But if you are going to do some more advanced stuff, so stuff that is really coming from you, you have a new application that I never seen. It's really your creation, or you are creating a new little game, for example, using PHP or JavaScript. Then I will say, wow, that's very advanced, and that's where you go from 80 to 100%. Okay. So up to 80% is just is the student who has understood everything in this class and who is going to apply it very well. Over 80% means that you are showing me something extra, okay, which is more than first year work. In terms of website quality, again, if it's full of broken links, if pictures don't display, or if it really looks like a mess, you will be below expectations. If everything is there, but it's incomplete and it doesn't look, but everything kind of work, you will be in the 40% plus. If you have a website which looks, professional, like many hundreds of other websites on the net, doesn't look like a student work, it looks like something professional, you will go in the 60, 80. And then if I am for getting more than 80 is your website stands out. Okay, that's something that people will bookmark because they provide a service that very few other websites use or provide. Okay, or the data that are showing or the presentation is such that people will go and go again there. Then you will go in the 80, 100% mark. Okay, so again, it needs to be quite exceptional. In terms of the comments, obviously, if you don't provide any comments, or if your comments doesn't tell me anything useful, you will be below expectation. If the comments are quite basic, you are not going into the details, but there is some values, you will be in the 40-60% range. If you do it well, you will be in the 60-80% range. And if you gave some very clever details, if you are doing some clever things in your implementation, not the standard one, but no, I'm not storing my data as integer, but a set of bits because it will be smaller to manipulate, so it's going to be faster. You are doing some kind of optimization type of stuff. That's where I will be again very impressed and give you in the 80-100%. Okay. So you can see that to get the 80-100% is going to be tough. Okay. And I'm not expecting many people being in that range, but that's okay. But I'm really expecting most people to be in the 60-80%. Okay. So that's really having had a very good understanding of the whole course and using what we have seen and putting everything together in a coherent and well-described website. Do you have any question? Has anybody already started? Yeah? What topic have you chosen?
Mine is kind of cake sales.
Cake?
sale. Cake sale. Selling cakes.
Oh, selling cakes. Okay, so it's kind of e-commerce website. Okay. And which technology have you used so far?
I use JavaScript for slideshow, and I'm in the process of making a order form that I use PHP and MySQL.
Okay, excellent. So the JavaScript for slideshows. So again, that's traditional techniques. Okay, so that's textbook. So it's not advanced JavaScript, but it's good JavaScript. And then you are using PHP for a form with a database. Again, you are in the 60-80 type of mark. You know, according to your description, if I had to pick a mark, it would be between 60 and 80. So you are very well on the right track. Yeah. Anybody else who would like to share what they have done? Okay, so it's quite a big piece of coursework. So the best is to start early, especially that towards the end of the term of the teaching block, you will have a lot of assessment from all the other modules. So, and since now we have seen all the technologies, you are ready. You know, the other aspect of the other lectures will not have much influence on that coursework. So you should be getting started if you haven't started yet. You know that we have the academic mentors who are there to support you, and they have their a specific support hour on Mondays between 12 and 1. So they are the ideal people to speak about that piece of coursework as well. They did it last year and they did it well. So yeah, please have some support from there. If you have some general questions about that piece of coursework, come to me. I think if you have the technical questions, it's better to go to them. Okay, they are doing it every day. They did it last year, and they have time. If you have more general questions, if you don't understand, can I do that or not for that piece of coursework, email me and I will tell you if it's acceptable or not. I mean, if you have any general doubt, please contact me. Or if you are using the code of someone else and you're not too sure about how to reference it, in order to be sure not to be doing any plagiarism, let me know as well and I will help you on that. So as I said, you have the mentors. You have also the second Academic Success Center. I don't know if you are aware of those people. They're on the first floor of the Sopwith building, end of the corridor, to the right. So they're offering programming aids. Okay, so they are basically PhD students in computing science, so the very advanced level in programming, and they are there to help you with your programming problem in general. The Academic Success Center doesn't just provide help with programming, but they also provide help with report writing. Okay, I mean, this report is very technical, so you may not need help for that, but maybe in other modules where you have to write a well-structured report where the level of English is important and all those things. Again, they have PhD students in literature and social sciences who are there. You can go with a chapter of your report, they will read it, give you some feedback, help you to structure it better, to correct your English or your structure, and so on. So again, take advantage of them. They are paid for it, it's free for you, it's very good support, so please use them if you feel the need. I mean, they are there every year, so it's for the first year, the second year, the third year. feel free to use their services. Any question? Okay, so thank you very much for your attention. And as I said, Pushpa will be coming back for the next few sessions.